Perspectives from Intelligent Automation Technology Innovators is the subject of our next discussion. I want to welcome Payam Musavi of KPMG to lead this discussion. He will be joined by Edmundo Costa. He is the Vice President of Automation Anywhere, and Arvind Sathi of IBM Watson. And no Jeopardy questions for him, please. Thanks all for your attention. And gentlemen, thank you for coming.
Thank you. Well, I hope everyone has enjoyed the first half of the day. And I have the pleasure of moderating today's session with our vendors. And I think they represent the two different spectrums we talked about in the last panels about the class one. We have automation anywhere, the robotics process automation, and our vendor with IBM Watson, probably class 3. I think both of them do some of the work in class 2 as well. And I think not just they represent the vendors, I think they bring with them vast experience implementing a number of these projects. So hopefully we get some of that perspective as well across industries, both in government and some of the other industries. So let's start it up, and if you don't mind, Edmundo, just giving us a quick introduction, and we'll show a quick video.
Absolutely. So thank you for the introduction, and thank you all for the opportunity to share this time. Automation Anywhere, that's the company that I'm here to speak a little bit about our products and our experience. Just to set the stage, by 2020, we will be the largest employer in the world. Like Uber is today one of the largest transportation companies in the world, and Airbnb is one of the largest lodging companies in the world, we are seeing a very rapid increase in the use of bots worldwide. We're currently at about 500,000 digital workers, and we'll be at over 3 million by 2020. So this is happening very, very quickly in every industry sector you can imagine: manufacturing, pharmaceuticals, life sciences, financial services, you name it. And by the way, across the globe. So no geography in the world is at this point exempt from this move. So it's a very exciting time to be talking with all of you and sharing what I think will be an incredible transformation to as the digital workforce becomes a part of our workforce.
Yes. Do you want to? So I think we're going to show a quick video.
Yeah. So we promised. I mean, I think what I want to do is, before we get into the conversation, is actually show you what is, when we talk about the tool and RPA, actually show you what it is. I think it's going to help you have a better appreciation for what the power of what we're talking about. So let's go ahead.
Yeah, do it. Very short, simple video.
So what we're going to show you is, this is our development system, and we're going to actually launch a recorder. And what the recorder is going to do is it's going to copy every single thing the human being is doing interacting with an invoicing application. This is a web-based invoicing application. And what the system is doing is every single mouse click, every single entry of information into that web interface is being captured and is generating a command in what will be an automation. Okay, so this is a way to make it very easy to develop an automation using something we call a recorder. Okay, the way you would develop a macro in Excel using a recorder, except in this case, what the product is doing is it's actually understanding the underlying object model of the user interface, and it's capturing every single interaction the person has with the underlying application. Now, in this particular case, it's we just finished, by the way, the recording. We're going to go ahead and save the recording to a file. We're going to go ahead and now save it and open up the file, and you're going to see what the automation actually looks like once it's been captured by the recorder. So every single line you see there is a command that has been created by the recorder. We're now going to use commands on the left-hand side to add the programmatic elements to the automation. Everything is drag and drop and wizard driven. So those commands that you see there, they cannot be edited. They cannot be programmed. They're not code. They're all edited by wizards, all wizard driven interfaces. everything. So here we're showing you the Excel input. This is how you're getting the information to generate the invoices. We're going ahead and creating variables that map to the Excel spreadsheet. Those variables are being defined in the automation. Again, all wizard driven, no programming. Everything you see there is the actual way. We're watching somebody actually develop an automation in this video. So everything is being put in. We're putting in some error handling as well, so that if there's exceptions in the process, those exceptions will be written to a file that has all the exceptions. And we're going to go ahead and move the commands to the appropriate place in the automation. That's what you're seeing there. And at this point, we're basically done. We developed the automation. It's that quick. So I know that's kind of shocking to see. But when Paul Bartley earlier talked about how easy it is to fill the potholes, this is what he was referring to. Now we're actually going to run the automation. So you're actually watching the bot now building invoices. So the bot is actually creating invoices using the Excel inputs that were in that spreadsheet, and the automation is going ahead and executing. This is what an RPA robot looks like when it's in action. So in this particular case, the bot is creating invoices for us. This gives you a flavor for the art of the possible, right? The idea is to kind of spark the imagination and the conversation here around what this RPA Class 1 type of automation can do in filling those potholes that we all have. So we're basically almost finished here in the process. So again, a person with relatively modest technical skills can easily embrace this tool. If you look at some of our largest clients, like for example AT&T, which is a joint Automation Anywhere KPMG client, they've got over 2,000 people trained on this tool, of which only about 200 actually do development work. The other 1,800 are actually do the business analysis and the recommendations around which potholes to fill. That's it.
Thank you. Arvind?
Okay. Thanks a lot, Pam, for inviting us. Let me first introduce myself a little bit. I did my PhD in artificial intelligence from Carnegie Mellon. One of my advisors was Dr. Herb Simon, who somebody was mentioning earlier, 1957 was the starting point for AI. And Herb Simon was the person who introduced AI. So I actually got some words of wisdom from the guy who first invented the term. I worked for a startup called Carnegie Group for a number of years and went through an interesting phase where AI winter came. And we were still a viable company, so we had to figure out how to make it work. So I learned a lot in terms of a lot of what I was hearing earlier today on not having a big bang, making sure that it's all profitable, because we were a startup and we had to somehow survive. Fortunately, we did go to NASDAQ, and it gave me very valuable lessons in terms of how do you actually build real AI systems, not concepts, not hype, but the real ones. And I had a lot of interesting experience there in terms of building what we are calling now the Class 1, Class 2, Class 3. Because in one case, I built a Class 1 system in about 4 months' time, and it became eventually a monster that ended up replacing about 600 people, and ended up killing a major program in the process. So we have to be careful in terms of what you build, because who knows, a little system that you may be building, you may find 8 years later still working for the corporation. And you have to kind of think about how to maintain it, how to change it, how to enhance it, because you don't want that system to become the deterrent to progress of the organization itself. IBM has been working a fair amount in this area. With the starting point was Jeopardy, which was a concept demonstration. It was one of the largest concept demonstrations for AI, where they built a system, a capability, handcrafting it. And then eventually we said, now we got to make money out of it. So we started to build products piece by piece out of the Jeopardy program that was created. And what you see in Bluemix today is a number of those capabilities coming out in the cloud, where companies like KPMG are building audit systems, tax systems, advisory systems to take advantage of these Bluemix services, which are components of what was there originally in the Jeopardy system. What I'm going to show you today is a video. IBM is very much into health, and I wanted to pick up health as an example because from the government perspective, this is a major area. Other than finding cure to cancer, the other area that we work very much is in terms of health records, organizing the health data, and working through connecting the dots, because in most cases, doctors don't really have that much time. And the question is, how do you go about connecting the dots in a way that it is societally and from a systemic perspective, encompassing everything that we do about in the data. So it's a lot of analytics, a lot of unstructured reasoning, a lot of assimilation of that data from a variety of sources. And if you can start the video, we'll show you how that kind of data gets accumulated and used by Watson.
Hello, my name is Watson. Here at the Quest Diagnostics Laboratory, I am working with science and medical experts in ways that were once thought to be impossible. Together, we are providing information regarding therapeutic options to clinicians all over the country. Here is how it works. Every day, Quest Diagnostics receives biopsies from oncologists. The experts here use next-generation sequencing, combined with clinical interpretation, to analyze the DNA of each tumor. After the genomic data is collected, I can use my cognitive capabilities to extract relevant insights from millions of medical journals and research papers in minutes. This helps provide therapeutic options identified in the literature for the DNA alterations detected in patients. Once the case is reviewed by a medical doctor at Quest, a report is sent back to the treating oncologist, who can create a personalized therapeutic plan tailored to the genetic makeup of their patient's cancer. 160,000 new cancer studies are released each year. I can find relevant data and medical information, and help the specialists at Quest apply them to each cancer case. Working together, we are providing more information to help doctors personalize therapeutic options. That sounds like a good plan to me.
Well, thank you, and I hope this gives you a good visual, what these tools can do and what the art of possible is, as Arvind and Linda said. So before getting into the technology, let's go back to the people. And again, you've implemented this in many industries, many nations. So what have you seen? What has been the impact of this technology on the people? And how do they interact with it? And is there job loss, employee satisfaction? What have organizations done to make the process better? So maybe if you could share some of your thoughts, Edmundo.
Sure. So we have very public clients that have actually been on the record on the impact this has had. ANZ Bank, AT&T are a couple of examples. And I think you've already heard some of the notions that they talk about, which is these are companies that have a big challenge around retention, around attrition. They see the automation of mundane and frankly very boring tasks as a way to augment and fundamentally change the work, freeing people from work that is not very rewarding. And that's really the view that we hear our customers talk about. Now, that being said, the reality is that so there's a couple of things that I would also say about the journey. There's a fundamental common thread to the success of this technology, and that is that it has to come from the bottom up. The organization has to embrace the technology. There has to be a kind of a fundamental cultural change in the organization. So what our most successful clients have done is they've used the ease of use capabilities of our tool to enable a very broad set of people to be trained, to understand the capability, and then to have them actually participate in the process of defining, and I keep using this analogy, I think it's a great analogy, that, identifying the potholes that need to be filled in their organizations, right? I mean, in my neighborhood, it's the neighbors that, call the city and say which potholes should be filled, right? It isn't the mayor, and that's actually what makes a successful journey. So when you have your organization, and I actually sat in on some of the trainings that we did for AT&T, and the level of enthusiasm and excitement from the people that were being trained as they saw the capability of the tool and how it could change the workplace and how it would make people's jobs more interesting and remove the burdens of the things that we all hate to do. I mean, let's face it, we all have things in our daily lives that we'd rather not be doing. They're mundane, they're tedious, and if we can offer our organizations a way to remove that, wouldn't you think that people would embrace that? Well, of course they do. Okay, and so we need to stop thinking about bots as a threat, but rather bots as a huge way to change the way people work. Now, when you obviously over time, that means the jobs change. You may need less people, and that's a reality, right? But the way this permeates the organization is actually very differently than I think the way people imagine.
Yeah, one of the things that I want to talk about is, as much as it is not about job loss, but maybe job transformation, but it's also a question of retention of expertise. One of the things I have seen happen across many organizations, whether government, whether large public organizations, is that organizations have an organizational amnesia. They kind of forget whatever they learned 5 years later, 10 years later, because the people who learned it are gone. And that expertise goes out of the door. And there's no way to retain that expertise today. You can write manuals, you can write into memos, but the question is, who's going to read that? It has to be in an actionable form for the expertise to be retained. I left KPMG some time back, and the first thing that people around me wanted to do was to get a copy of my laptop, because I was one of those pack rats. I had every case study, every information on what KPMG was doing. The question was, who would retain that expertise? And it is a real problem for any organization that has got lots of experts, because we tend to ignore our ability to document, categorize, organize expertise in a way that it can be reused and recycled and reworked. Now, with the new stuff that's happening, we have got actually an explosion of expertise. So what you saw in the cancer example that I was showing you earlier is there is so much knowledge that for a medical doctor it's very hard to keep up. So now it's a question of, can I have an augmentation whereby I can build corporate expertise that people can take advantage of? So instead of trying to go and find a manual, trying to go and Google my way to find a piece of information, I can actually let an assistant organize it for me. So a lot of this is about intelligent augmentation, and of course it gets rid of some of the mundane tasks which we should not be doing anyway. It happened primarily because System A could not talk to System B, or there was some kind of an unstructured portion in some system that the next system could not take. Those things must be automated. But the real question is, are you in the process creating a better organization, much more organic organization that's able to change, retain its expertise, and move on and do better things over time?
Thank you. So let's get back to the technology itself. And in the last few panels, we talked about these potholes, and what makes, I guess, these potholes being filled faster is the speed and how this technology is different. I've done many of these multi-million-dollar, multi-year projects, and I think what makes this different from your traditional IT? Could you elaborate a little bit on that? How this technology is intelligent automation, and let's say you had when the RPA is different from traditional IT and scripting.
It is fundamentally different. So first of all, RPA leverages the user interface. Traditionally, our automation projects had focused on APIs. And unfortunately, many of our applications either don't have APIs or they're extremely complex to deal with. But they all have user interfaces, and that's the common interface that every application environment has. And so what RPA really has done is to enable the use of the user interface in a way that's never been done before. What you saw in that video was RPA using the object model of the user interface. So it's not using screen scraping or image recognition or coordinate-based interactions, but it's actually understanding the underlying software that draws the UI and interacts at that layer. Where it's different is that because it's incredibly easy to use, it empowers the line of business. It empowers the business to actually use the tool and to build these automations in ways that an API-based automation could never do, because you needed to be very technical to use an API interface. I think IT, though, still plays a critical role in terms of enabling the infrastructure for the automation to eventually run at scale securely. And so you can't lose sight of that ultimately you have the standard reliability, availability, security, and scalability issues, the RAS issues of any enterprise application. So make no mistake about it, RPA, while it is business-driven and very amenable to business use, when you deploy it at scale, it's an enterprise-class application, and it needs to be governed and controlled and implemented the way you would implement any enterprise-class technology.
Yeah, I think this is something that all the three classes share. The basic premise of that is that they are looking at human tasks. So of course, observation is one of the aspects. Machine learning from there and being able to learn and understand what is underlying in that. It changes from class 1 to class 3. In class 1, it's a lot more mechanical learning. In class 3, it becomes a lot more of deep learning and ability to use machine learning to do a lot of that learning. It's also a lot of crowdsourcing. I mean, basically what we are trying to do in a lot of these systems is understanding the nuances. Very often the reason why you have lots of people sitting there doing mundane tasks is because there are nuances that the systems were not designed to do. It's a question of, can I crowdsource all those nuances, pull it together, and start to organize it in a way that it can be reused. To that extent, it is not like writing a program, because if you wrote requirements for those nuances, you will be spending millions of years trying to build the right kind of an environment. And we don't really have that much time, so this is a lot more of on-the-job training, where you build the first system, you start letting crowdsourcing provide you with the rest of the details, and constantly learn from there. As we noted on the RPA side, there is also the regular UI, there's also the regular system interfaces, the databases that have to be created. So there is still the traditional IT involvement, and we cannot function outside of IT organization, though we have to work in a very strong collaboration with them so that what we build is not an island of automation. That was, by the way, one of the biggest mistakes we did in the first AI winter. I built a number of systems which were grand systems, except that they did not connect to the IT systems. And What we found in that those experiences were that those systems lasted only as long as the people who were there to feed the system with the extra data that IT system was not providing, and then they went away because they could not stand on it on their own. An integrated environment does require a full integration with the rest of the systems.
One common question that we always get asked when I go and speak with clients, as well as was asked in this forum, is around security. And so how are these, is there a concern around these bots going rogue? Or, like for instance, in the RPA, having it being hacked or doing something that you didn't program it to do? So how does that work, and how do you secure it?
Yeah, I mean, that's a common myth. So the fact is that when you build the automation, you saw that you're using a recorder or you're using so the bot is only going to do what it's been programmed to do by the business user. When you actually create the automation, you then deploy it, and you have all the standard dev, test, prod, software development lifecycle controls that you would have for any software development. When you actually execute the automation, you execute it as a user. So I think Paul mentioned that it's you have an Active Directory entry. It actually has its own identity in your authentication system. It's got all the privileges and access rights that you would give any user in your environment. So a lot of companies name their bots, by the way, that's very common. And so, you might have, people like to actually, there's ANZ Bank actually celebrates every time a bot is born. And actually they also celebrate when a bot dies, interestingly enough. And there is a life cycle for these things. And so the bot, basically, when they execute as a user. So they have all the proper authentication and privileges to execute with the appropriate privileges that you grant it. Now, the interesting thing about a bot is that you can have very granular logging and auditing of everything a bot does. So, a bot isn't going to, surf the internet. A bot is only going to do exactly what it was told to do, but you can also record and log and audit every single thing the bot does, time-stamped and stored, and you can even generate events and alerts against what a bot is doing. So the level of control that you can place over a bot is, a magnitude higher than anything you can do for its human counterpart. So, yes.
Thank you. And Arvind, just very
the
quickly.
The only thing I would add to what Arvind said was you have to look for very interesting possibility that we sometimes ignore. There could be a bot to hack your bot. So I found one situation where we had a web presence, and the competitor decided to get this entire pricing model. The only thing they had to do was systematically go after it and create enough transactions that they could get the entire pricing model out of it. So we have to kind of look for those possibilities where there could be new ways in which information could be hacked, especially because you have automated it, you have made it easier, accessible, which means you have made it accessible to the bad guys to go and steal it also.
Yeah, I mean, it's no different. I mean, humans are subject to social engineering attacks, and I mean, there's always a risk to anything. But I would argue that the risk profile of a bot is a magnitude lower than a risk profile of a human, just because you have so much more control over what the bot can and can't do.
That's true.
Including monitoring every single thing the bot does. So even if a hacker in some way could misuse a bot, you'd have sufficient control that you would know when such a thing happened if through the logging and auditing mechanisms.